Welcome back to The Accidental Writer at the Alex Cafe. I'm Susan Berg, and this is my talkative co-host, Dick Gross.
And I'm here dressed in this pretentious orange scarf, not only because I'm a pretentious dickhead, but it's the middle of winter in Melbourne.
Today on the show we have Elizabeth Flann, who is a 2019 Banjo Prize winner for fiction. Well done.
And Hamo, our resident poet, is speaking to Steve Smart. Steve Smart's a local poet based in Footscray, who's a doyen of both the stage and the page. I think by what he means by that is that he performs his poetry as well as putting it out in written form. So,
I hope you enjoy the show.
So do I.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Is it?
It absolutely is. I know that you two know each other outside of this, but you have grown up in the world of literature your whole life and spent 20 years in publishing before then going into tertiary education to teach editing and script writing, and now you've totally ditched that altogether to go into your true love, which is writing fiction. Let's start from the beginning and talk about the publishing industry. How did you get into that?
Quite by accident. I was travelling in London and I joined an agency and I said, I'll do anything. And they sent me to a job where I was to be trained as a book editor.
So this was a literary agency and your passion
No, it was a computer company. And they
right?
put out 2 very major journals and I got a complete training in publishing. And I only worked there for 2 years, then I came home. But it started me off working
But you
in
were always
publishing.
a bibliophile.
Always, yes. I was a reader from a very early age.
From Enid Blyton on.
Oh yes.
Oh, gosh,
I wasn't
yes.
allowed to read Eden Blyton, so I bought them myself with my pocket money.
Oh, I loved Enid Blyton.
Yes.
I was completely transfixed by Enid Blyton, and then my son was too.
Yeah.
He's a big reader,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you know we'd go to libraries, and we were living in England too for 2 years, and you know he'd just go through the Enid Blyton stock they had within a couple of weeks, and then on to the next library.
That's
Well, they were
fabulous.
adventures. That's
absolutely.
what I've always liked, and that's what I write.
But if you reread them,
Oh.
which I had to do with this son of mine, you know, they're out unsupervised overnight pretending to be scarecrows in the snow. You know?
Well, they were children that were off on adventures of their own. They didn't need really
Well, they were
parental
very
guidance.
adventurous.
Yes,
They really were.
they were.
Yes. So tell me, when you came back and you went into publishing here as well,
Yes.
where did you work and what kind of role were you in?
I moved into educational publishing, and for some reason, I think because I had had a brief period working at CSIRO, I became a science editor.
Right.
Which is in the family, your brother
Yeah,
being a
my
scientist?
whole family are scientists except for my mother, so I think that made sense.
Yes.
And I worked in educational publishing for 25 years. And then I was invited to teach editing at Victoria College, which later became Deakin University. And then I was invited to coordinate the Graduate Diploma of Professional Writing. So I moved into academic work.
So let's focus on the education of writing and creative writing in particular. From the outside, it seems to have exploded in the numbers of institutions offering the course and the number of kids undertaking it. Is that a fair?
I think so. When we started the course at Victoria College, there were only, I think, 3 in Victoria.
Which would be Melbourne,
And
RMIT.
RMIT, yes, which was much more editing oriented. And I think that was enough. I think that there probably became too many. Because there are not a lot of writers who are very good teachers.
Yes.
And you need writers really to teach in them. So I think it can become a bit stretched.
So, I mean, just from the outside, there are a number of kids I know who are doing creative writing as a course. And I worry that they have expectations of their ability to successfully write
As in for a career
as
afterwards?
for a career. What's your reaction to that?
I think people do overestimate how easy it is to live by writing. It's not easy.
I'm one of them.
It can be done. I think we were very careful with who joined our groups, and we also taught them a lot about the business side of writing.
Right, pitching
how publishing worked, how screenwriting worked, how all of those industries. We had a lot of people come in and talk about their role, producers, publishers, all sorts of people, to put it in a context, because in America people do earn a lot of money as writers, but here not very many at all.
Totally different America.
Very few. So.
And those people who make that big money are either, in America, the airport-style novels, the fat novels,
yes,
or the self-improvement industry.
And we had 2 students who did this, fantasy.
Of course, fantasy.
And they did very well in the American market and made a lot of money.
They went over there and lived?
No, they wrote it here and they still live here, but they sold them there.
And how did they do that? They got an American agent and...
Yes, one of them did. I don't know the other one. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But we did a survey of students to see how they'd ended up. And we were really impressed with how many had had books published, how many had had plays produced, and how many had had short films. Not longer films, that's much harder, but short films had done quite well.
Well, I think that's quite uplifting because, the urban mythology is that there's all these creative writers out there who do creative writing courses and then don't have a career at the end of it.
Yeah. I think if you think, I'm a genius, I'll write a story and everybody will want it, you're not going to do so well in a course.
No.
Because everybody's like that in that course. But if you really want to learn how to deal with the industry, how to write better, and how other people write, I think they're very good.
Well, it sort of reminds me of Fame. A lot of Fame, the musical and the film, is about dealing with failure.
Yes.
90% won't get a gig on Broadway. So, there's always this clash between the academic teachers and the creative teachers. The creative teachers want everyone to pass who's good at dance, but maybe thick as. And so there's always this recognition in, academic creativity that people arrive with vaulting ambition and expectation.
Yeah.
This can be in a lot of industries.
Yes, yes.
You're also involved with script writing,
yes.
Both writing yourself and teaching.
Yes.
How long does it take to write a script?
Well, for me, I would say a year,
at
least, and then you look for funding to improve it, and so on. So probably several years. Yeah.
With how many edits?
Lots of edits.
Yeah.
And lots of input from other people usually.
Yeah.
Which is always very alarming, because often people will read your precious work and say very mean things about it.
Yes. That's one thing I used to teach in editing. Always say the nice things first. There must be something good.
Yes.
And then where there's room for improvement.
Don't start with the problems.
I remember I had one transcript, I dropped it off on Christmas Eve, and then I rang her up a month or 2 later and she says, "Oh, well, you have to start again."
Oh, that's not
I would not have encouraged that kind of response.
Well, I did start again, and I did change the voice.
Yes. I would have had it further down.
Yes.
Because then you'd be listening.
Yeah.
If it's first up, people go, "Oh," and it doesn't work. But if you say it after you've said something good, they listen.
I forget where the evil message came in in the email.
Was there some constructive?
Oh, she was right. She was right, because there were several characters and a narrator, and they all had the same voice, my voice.
Right.
So what you had to do was get rid of the narrator, so that's one less dick voice,
Put your mind into the different characters.
and then change the way the characters related to each other. So I made the main character sort of the narrator.
It is a problem. A lot of young students particularly will give everybody else their voice.
Yeah.
And they'll
So
have
that's
their
a common thing, is it?
Yeah.
What other common things do people need
Having
to
no
improve
plot.
on? Okay.
You really have to have a plot for any kind of story, I think.
So, sorry.
Well,
Unless you're very, very good.
So there was that writer, look, her name escapes me, but she actually in the end demented, but she'd come out with a book once a year in part of the Oxford-Cambridge circle.
Iris Murdoch.
Iris Murdoch. And a lot of them were plotless.
Yes, but she could get away with it. And this is the thing, people say, oh, but she can do it. But you have to be very good.
She was a brilliant writer,
Yes.
and it was, and the stuff, the pages were peppered with wisdom and interesting characters, but nothing happened.
No. But it was worth
Bit like
reading.
Seinfeld, was it?
Yes.
Well, you know,
In
but at least
writing.
Seinfeld's upfront about it.
It's a show about nothing.
It's a show about nothing.
But I think you have to know the rules to break them. You know, people say,
Right.
oh, I want to write something that's totally different. Well, that's very good. But you have to have the skill to be able to get that across. And there are
Look,
people who can.
That's right, and I've written a work recently where I gave it to one of the senior people in this form of writing, and she said, you know, you're breaking the rules and you don't know them, which I thought was a bit harsh. But
Yeah. Well, I can understand what that
what
means.
she's saying,
Yes.
yeah.
Don't know that I'd agree. I'd have to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The great issue for many writers is the lack of publication opportunities. So,
Yeah, I've faced this just as anybody has. There are a lot of competitions now, which I think is wonderful. But the best thing is to get an agent, if you can. And that's not easy.
we've had publishers here who've said the opposite. Whatever you do, don't get an agent, come straight to us.
Yes, I've
No,
seen
but
absolutely.
that
go
saved them a lot of
direct.
trouble. As a writer, I say
Yeah.
get an agent. As a publisher, I'll probably say, oh no, you don't need an agent.
Okay.
Right.
So, you've had 3 film screenplays unfilmed,
Yes.
but you've had this spectacular success with Beware of Dogs.
Well, I submitted that to a competition. It was for an unpublished manuscript.
That's the
So it's
banjo.
Banjo
And the
Prize.
Banjo Prize, yes. So they're a wonderful opportunity. I didn't expect to
So
win.
that's nice to be a winner of that
Oh,
for your
it was.
first, you know,
Yes.
novel.
Yes.
That's amazing. I shouldn't say amazing. It's
I was
well done.
absolutely thrilled.
Congratulations.
Well,
Yes.
We're not going to speak about this, but today, because we'll drag you back kicking and screaming to
Okay.
have another chat about this. But you're basically now, after a lifetime of teaching people how to do it, you're now part of the HarperCollins stable.
Yes. Which has been wonderful.
And yeah, I mean, I read anecdotes about people meeting with their publishers saying, "When are you going to give me another book?" That's my dream.
Yes.
With this one, what was the time frame? And
It took about a year to write. I think for anything, any major production, a year is the minimum you can
And
spend on it.
then with you educating other people on how to edit, did you then still need to have another editor look through it with
yes,
fresh eyes?
yes.
And
But the terrible thing, if you're an editor, is self-editing too often and too much. You know, you've got to make sure you don't edit every chapter over and over again before you go on, or you'd never go on.
Well, that's right. It's that
So it's a
attention
bit
to
of a
detail.
hazard.
Yeah.
that was
Yes.
me. I did mine 20 times, I
Yes.
reckon, before I kind of started letting other people have a read.
Yeah. And I tried to freeform it, write it, and then edit it.
So, as a final question before we wrap up, how did you come to write this book, which is about, it's a mystery?
It's an adventure, really. There is a mystery.
There is a mystery, and it's
Bit of a
Enid
thriller.
Blyton coming back?
Yes, in many ways.
And
And I came to write it because I was trying to write something quite different. And I kept going to sleep and dreaming that I was trapped in a cave. And this happened for about 3 weeks. And in the end I started writing down what I dreamed, that I was a very young woman trapped in a cave. So I thought, oh, this is a message from somewhere. I'll write it down. So I did. And then I realised I had to write that one and not the one I was trying to write.
So the plot, the plot arose from that scenario rather than the scenario being part of the plot?
Yes, it was very difficult. I had to go for very long walks and think, how did she get here?
Yeah.
Why was she here? Why was she upset by this? And also the dreams had some of her nightmares in it. So I had to think, well, where would that have come from? So it was sort of backwards.
Well, well done for getting it down on paper and all those dreams out. It's come to fruition, and fabulous that you've won the prize. I'm sure it's absolutely well deserved, and thank you for coming in and joining us today.
And
Thank
thanks
you.
for addressing my fears about too many creative writing courses.
Thank you
I think
too.
I'm convinced.
And welcome to the program, Steve. It's great to have
Hello,
you here.
Hamish.
So, as you got into the scene in Melbourne here, what poets and what sort of activities that those poets did inspired you?
I was really lucky. I think I came in at a point, and the scene is very different now, in a good way. I think it's much broader now. There's a much wider representation. But I came in at a really interesting time when a lot of the sort of older poets that had been around, since the 60s, 70s, were very present. You would go to the Dan O'Connell on a Saturday, or when the Builders Arms had their Sunday gigs in Fitzroy, and there's Shelton Lee and Myron Lysenko and Eric Beach, Lauren Williams, Patrick Alexander, a ton of people who had like such a rich history, people that had quite literally started what we think of as the Melbourne poetry scene in terms of, doing readings in cafes and pubs and stuff. So I really was quite blessed to soak that in, and over a number of years from when I came in, we lost a lot of those people. Shelton went, Patrick Alexander and Ted Lord, who ran the reading at the Dan, many people, Dorothy Porter. There was sort of a period where people were dying, not of anything in particular, just it's a natural occurrence. But also people were starting to, retire from their jobs and move to the country, or, just wanted a bit of a sea change.
Life moving on.
Yeah.
How did that influence you as a poet and performer? What sort of things did that develop in you?
I think, in some ways it sort of felt like there was a period where it felt like I'd sort of inherited a scene, because there were a lot of people for various reasons that were very much, what did Lauren Williams say? She never wanted to be called stalwarts of that scene. And there's a certain amount of responsibility to that. But also I think that writing a lot too many, you would sort of have these readings, you'd have someone's funeral and the wake and the thing, but then you'd have, 6 weeks of tribute readings and things. And you don't want to mess it up. You don't want it to look like you're taking advantage of something to go, ooh, here's an excuse to, put my work out into the world. But I always felt that responsibility that if you're gonna get up on stage and you're gonna read a poem for somebody who is no longer, I don't wanna get it wrong. I don't want to disrespect the memories that I have of that person.
With your own poetry, what influences you in the things that you choose to write about? And you write about many and varied things, but one of the things I've noticed about you in the way you go about it is you hone in on pop culture icons in film
I have been
and
known.
TV series and various musicians and bands. Yeah,
I have
with
been
your own poetic portraits of those shows or those performers.
Yeah, I have been known to mention Motley Crue far more than they deserve. But I think, yeah, the last few years especially, I think maybe there's a book in it somewhere. But I did discover at some point that there was a running theme in the work that I've done recently. I did a gig for Michael Passionate Tongues the other night, and a lot of the first set was kind of tributes to, I guess, golden age of Hollywood actresses. So I've now got Betty Davis, Hedy Lamarr, oh Lord,
The two Hepburns in that.
the
clip that you
Hepburns, Barbara
sent me. Yep.
Stanwyck, the Andrews sisters. I now have a poem tribute to the Andrews sisters,
Andrews
which made me
sisters.
very happy. I went down a YouTube wormhole that day, and I came out of it and went, I must write a poem for the Andrews sisters, which is not something that anybody expects anybody.
Okay, given your involvement and commitment and your own artistry over nearly 25 years, what would you say to somebody young and new coming into the scene nowadays?
Run!
Run, yes.
No, not at all.
Away.
I think it's probably, I don't think that you could find a better time. And obviously, you know, through the lockdowns, things have got a little bit quieter than they were, you know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but that will come back. I remember Shelton Lee said to me, but, you know, he said it often and frequently, that when he came into the poetry scene in the, I guess, late 60s, this was really early La Mama, and, you know, some of the cafes around Carlton that were starting to kind of do things in Fitzroy. And he said he came in and he went, wow, this is amazing. Oh, never get bigger than this. And then the 70s came and he went, oh, well, this is definitely, we've peaked out now. This is as big as it's going to get. And, you know, decade by decade. And he died in the early 2000s. And even at that time, he was just going, we had no idea that it was going to, and, you know, and in the nearly 20 years since he passed away, it's just exploded. So it is a really, you know, it's a really good time to be a young poet, I hope. You know, you've got all these performances, you've got, you know, the internet, and, you know, a ton of sort of small press publications coming out all the time.
Yeah, there's zones and all sorts of. All right, Steve, thank you very much for coming to the program.
St Kilda.
Great to see you here, yeah, and welcome to St Kilda too.
All right, let's go have a coffee.
Yeah, we can do that. All right, thank you.
When they speak of her now, if they speak of her now, they say she was very pretty, that she was. She still is really, but they don't say it anymore. I wonder why that is. Certainly life has not been easy. Lines will etch themselves into skin, and who has the time to be constantly turning back time? But it's still a lovely face if you look. And if you don't look, well then who are you to say whether a person looks nice or not? Maybe we're all not as young as we used to be. Some of us are missing teeth and or other bits. Or maybe we're a bit pale from toiling away in darkened rooms too often, yes. Maybe we haven't seen the sunshine since Johnny Cash only knew when, and our gym memberships lapsed last month of 2002, but we're doing the best we can. And if you don't say we're very pretty as often as you used to, well, maybe one day someone won't say something nice about you too. And how the hell will you like it? You certainly won't. But you won't realize how nice it is for people to tell you you look nice until they don't anymore. It's the goddamn trouble with youth. It just never appreciates itself until poof, too late.
Steve's clip in relation to ageing, I think, is going to really resonate with a lot of people.
Well, you know, being 66 and a half myself, it was a very poignant piece of writing. And we're all losing bits. I've got a gap in my tooth here, which I'm getting replaced in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, he summarised the decline that we all endure as we age.
Yeah, I think we all should try and focus on ageing gracefully and being grateful that we're still here
to age. Yes.
Yeah.
It was interesting because with Elizabeth, we did go into the whole issue of creative writing courses. Are there too many of them? Are there not enough? What do they equip you for? So she actually turned me around. I always thought there were too many, but you know, she actually...
And the likelihood of getting published afterwards as
yeah,
well.
so I actually changed my mind on that. It's just I think people have to go into any writing exercise with a fairly realistic view of their ambitions about whether it's likely to get published or not.
So hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
See you later.